Well, good afternoon. My name is Mike Snelly, and I'll serve as co-moderator today of the 12th and final webinar for this year, 2021, in the Shackelford Lecture Series. So excited about our next speaker. Before that, in case you're new to this webinar series, uh, our speaker, Bob Gerdes, will have total control over this talk, but towards the end of his lecture, we'll certainly have time for Q&A. So although we won't be able to answer questions in advance or in real time, so to speak, if you'll hold your questions and put them in the chat feature, at the bottom of your screen, he will answer each and every one of those before we finish up today. Bob also has the prerogative, if he chooses to take a break, he can call that. And if he does, we'll just all walk away from our PCs, take a break, and then start up within 5 or 10 minutes when he's ready. But I would certainly be remiss if I didn't again thank the former co-owners of TLC, Charles Shackelford and Linda Shackelford, Oklahoma City, for underwriting this series throughout this year and also into 2022. We're really excited. We have a neat lineup of people for all of you to tune into next year, and we'll have that registration link for you by hopefully tomorrow night or Monday morning. And like this year, we have a variety of talks that we're hoping that nobody goes away intellectually hungry. There'll be something for everybody, not only in the talk today, but then for the next 12 following in 2022. Um, I think because we had some technical problems and we're running behind, I want to go ahead and just cut to the chase and introduce our next speaker, Bob Gerdes, General Manager of TLC Oklahoma City. And you've heard me throughout the year bragging on TLC for historically staying in the top 100 retailers in the country. And that is just such a feat, as I mentioned around Thanksgiving in our last webinar. When you think of the size of the United States and for the Gerdeses and the Shackelfords and other people involved over the decades to hold that coveted title of top 100, that's a big deal. So excited for Frank and Bob and Wendy and other folks from TLC for maintaining that legacy of excellence and making Oklahoma proud as they have, as have some other people, admittedly as well. The Schultes over in Tulsa have also enjoyed the top 100, as well as some other growers that we see up in Sedan Floral, et cetera, et cetera. But today we're focusing on Bob Gerdes and his accomplishments. And Bob's talk today is going to be on trends in garden center sales. And the neat thing about Bob, and I think you all know him, if you don't though, he literally grew up in this industry. So from probably diapers, Bob was out there doing horticulture to date. So he's got many decades of experience to draw upon. And I, for one, am very excited to hear and further learn from him today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Bob Gerdes. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. I'm not too sure that sweeping floors and watering plants is a horticultural practice, but yeah, I did a lot of that too. The last couple of years, the last few years actually, have been very good in the garden center sales, nursery sales. Ever since the 2008 really recession was over, then and we got recovery from that, and it's kind of held fairly steady. Sales were steadily increasing for the last several years, and then of course the last 2 years have been unprecedented. Over the last few years, we've obviously enjoyed a pretty decent economy since that recession we recovered, and that has certainly helped. The oil economy has been not maybe what we would like in Oklahoma, but unlike decades in the past, that hasn't really adversely affected us sales-wise like it maybe did, say, in the 80s or 90s. I think that there's a few factors that have added to that. And one of them, I think, was millennials being home buyers has helped quite a bit. We've often wondered in not only our industry, but in a lot of them, as to how they would engage and become consumers, being as the generations before, the generation before that really just connected with gaming for the most part. As long as they had their Xbox, they were relatively happy. But the millennial bunch has seemed to be much more willing to spend time in their yards, spend time remodeling their houses. I have both my kids would fall in that category, and as my son tells me when he wants to take on a project, and I go, "Well, you've never done that," and he goes, "Dad, there's a YouTube video I can find, and it'll tell me how to do it." Next thing I'll know, I'll go over there and he's working on it or getting it done, and for the most part, it turns out all right. So I think they've embrace that, and they're a little more health conscious and outside conscious, and so I think that is really, even though we don't always believe that it's working, I think that we are seeing that. We're certainly seeing more of that age group in the store and starting to buy it, and I think that will really continue. Once we got to 2020, the pandemic hit. And we spent, like everyone else, we spent a month or so trying to know if they were even going to allow us to open the doors. They did, thank goodness. And then chaos ensued for us and pretty much everybody in the industry nationwide, in that the demand of people being more or less forced to stay home caused them to want to spend more time in their yards. When they spent more time in their yards, they wanted the yards to look better. So they still fortunately had some disposable income. Remodeling of homes was up. Anything that had to do around your house seemed to really taken off that year. So obviously us, along with pretty much everybody else in the industry, had a really great year as far as increases in sales for 2020. So when we got about this time in late of 2020, last year, we're more trying to figure out how are we going to keep those people engaged? How are we going to manage, still have those sales for 2021? How many of those can we keep? And then lo and behold, we end up with an ice storm that tears up trees all over the area. And then in February, we end up with a record-breaking freeze that damages existing plant material. And so, and we still had the effects of the pandemic going on. And so when we thought that year could not get any crazier than 2020, 2021 proved that, oh yeah, I can get a lot crazy. And so it really, well, like I said, was unprecedented. So it's been a little bit of a madhouse for everyone trying to negotiate that in the middle of a pandemic and trying to keep, obviously there's some obstacles in there because of that, availability of product and freight cost and some of the other things, labor, obviously, that have made that a real challenge. And I might, well, if we have some time at the end, I'll touch on a little of that, but for the most part, it has really been exciting time to be doing it. I basically just reviewed some of our sales, and we actually, Mike did not mention it, but in addition to our retail stores, we actually have a production facility on the site at Memorial Road. We have about 160,000 square feet of production space. And so we grow a fair amount of our own annuals and perennials. It used to be around about 2/3 of what we sold, we grew, and we bought in about 1/3. Well, with the increase in sales in the last 2 years, obviously we couldn't increase production by that much more. So that number's now gone down to where we're probably closer to 55% sales on what we grow versus what we buy in. So I also looked at our production plans of what we were planning on producing and items that we have added in and how we've made changes in that over the last 3 or 4 years, and certainly the last 2 years. So that's kind of where I came up with some of these things I thought we would discuss today. One of the things that we have noticed for a while now, not just in the last 2 years, it has certainly gotten more pronounced in the last 2 years, but was larger plant sizes have become rather in demand and selling well. So as Mike said, I've been in this, for those who don't know, since I was a kid. And so I remember back when I was a kid, there was no such thing as plastic pots. So all nursery material was pretty much grown in a fruit can, a metal fruit can, whether it was a 1 gallon or a 5 gallon. And greenhouse items were, there was no plastic. So there wasn't plastic pots, and there wasn't plastic flats, and there wasn't plastic trays. It was all wooden flats with, for the most part, 2-inch peat pots in them is what we grew in. And that was primarily what you grew. I don't remember us ever growing or seeing a 4-inch plant until probably the mid 70s or late 70s. So, and even trees back in the day, we sold a lot of 1.5-inch trees, and 2-inch trees was considered a big tree. Well, now, let's go to the 80s. The 80s, the 3-gallon material kind of became much more in demand. The Louisiana growers and the Alabama growers, the southeast part of the United States, started really sending more product into Oklahoma and Texas, and 3-gallon was what they did. So 3-gallon really became kind of the go-to, certainly on the landscape side, taking more of it. 3-gallon is still a standard size for us in shrubs, but we've actually noticed that we're getting much more demand for a little bit larger 5 gallons and 7 gallons and even 10s and 15s, depending on the plant. So whereas for a long time, you couldn't hardly sell a hawthorn or a boxwood, and a 3-gallon was pretty much what you sold, and some 1s. Now, if you have some 5s that have any size, or even if you have some 7s, they are actually being sold and being asked for, even when you don't have them. And part of that is probably because the damaged plants from the freeze may have been bigger and they didn't want to go back in. But part of it is there's just less patience by the customers to wait for something to grow. They'd rather have something with some size. The 10s and the 15-gallon shrubs have even kind of taken off, especially in some type of upright plant like a juniper, an upright juniper, Leyland cypress, magnolias, cedars, arborvitaes, that kind of stuff. Certainly is much more sales in that in larger plant material than there is in 5 gallons. Trees, there again, back when I was young, they were 5-gallon was mostly what you carried, about all you could find in a container tree. And now we still carry a handful of 5s, but it seems to be less all the time, and it's more into 7s. And lately, the availability is getting better, and the demand has certainly gotten better for 10 and 15-gallon trees, whether they be a maple or a pistache or a redbud. All of those have seemed to have increased in that size. I think the customers, there's enough larger containers now. I think customers are, for the most part, seem to be much more comfortable in if they're going to plant in themselves and planting a container plant versus a ball and burlap plant. So I think those sales have stayed pretty good. They're also easier to display, so I think the display also makes them sell a little bit better too. Annuals is one that we've really noticed in the last few years. As I said, it used to be a 2-inch annual, and once plastic came in, there was lots of 6-packs, and 4-inch really became a huge deal. Well, many garden centers, and we are certainly one of them, we don't carry any 4-packs or 6-packs. 4 inches is about as small a size as we'll carry. Those sales have remained fairly constant, but our increase in greenhouse items and annuals particularly is not in 4-inch. The sale increase that we have is all in larger plant sizes. 6 inches become a much more sold plant, and even 8s and 10s and 12 inches. A few years ago, probably 7, 8 years ago, we kind of played around a little bit with planting a few things when they first started coming out with, say, for lack of a better word, the combination plantings like confetti gardens. We started playing around with some of those and realized how easily they sold once they were in bloom. So we're now up to where we're doing close to 4,000 of those is what we grow in a spring. Some of those are in combination. Some of them are simple as just new gold lantana, but we're growing them in a 12-inch pot. And I don't know, we never seem to, we run out of space, but we don't seem to run out of demand for the most part. That has just seemed to be something we just continually kind of are tracing. The one advantage that we have is because we have a growing operation and because we don't sell to anybody, we're our only customer. We don't sell wholesale. So we don't have to ship them anywhere. So many of the commercial growers struggle on that size simply because of the freight problems of shipping those and the amount of cost that the freight would add to that plant. But for us, it's just moving it from the back of the property to the front of the property. It's much easier to do. But it has really taken off. But the 6 inches and 8 inches have actually really grown a lot too. That is one of the main trends, certainly a trend that we have really seen in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Container gardening is another trend that's been on the rise for quite some time and continues to grow. But the funny thing about container gardening to me is is how that's affected how people buy plants. The annuals there again, I think some of the demand for the larger annuals is because they're going to take them home and put them directly into a larger container ceramic pot. They don't want to go put a 2-inch or a 4-inch plant, say a periwinkle or a little bitty geranium in a pot. They want a 6 or an 8-inch that they can stick in there so that that container actually has a finished look when they're done. So I kind of understand the demand for that. You've also noticed that much more pots are being used. They're planting less flowers to me in beds, but they're putting so many more in pots. So you don't drive through neighborhoods and see a lot more flower beds being planted. You still see some, but you see a lot of people with pots either on the front porch, or I've even noticed they're starting to put pots of flowers out in the bed itself, just sitting it out in the mulch. And of course, as people have made their backyards more of a living room with outdoor kitchens and pergolas and all of the hardscapes that go on, and of course, there's a lot more place back in the backyard to put pots as well. One of the things we've noticed is that we continue to have a really big demand for patio tropicals, as we call them, which would be like, say, tropical hibiscus, bougainvillea, mandavillas, and date palms, some of the house plants that they can put outside. And those things have really are in demand. And I think a lot of that is because they're not putting them in pots, in beds, but they certainly are putting them in those in pots for the patio. Shrubs is another thing. We have made a real focus in the last 5 or 6 years of making sure that we have, excuse me, that we have plant material in shrubs that can be used in pots. So, for example, upright boxwood such as Grand Blandii and D. runx, and as well as say cone-shaped boxwoods, whether they be variegated or like a Newport, something that's got a bluish green tint to it, and as well as topiaries, pom-poms, and poodles, and that kind of stuff. Same thing with junipers. Junipers have been really big that we've had to buy I think we sell as many 5-gallon junipers almost for pots as we do for planting in the yard, it seems like. Even smaller junipers in a 3-gallon size, a little upright, which we don't really sell all that well there again for landscapes, but we do sell a lot of them for for containers. So there's a lot of that stuff that it's really caused us to have to dedicate the space and concentrate on buying those. And for example, fall was a really big deal. We bought as much stuff for pots as we did for probably sales for the landscape side of it as well. And of course, then besides container gardening, vegetable gardening, of course, has been up for the last 2 or 3 years. And I think I think part of that is a little bit of the millennials are willing to try and are starting to put in some gardens. But a lot of that was pandemic related, and that people were at home and they were worried about the availability of vegetables. And so I think container garden or vegetable gardening got a pretty good little boost out of that. I think we've noticed that there again, container gardening in vegetables has increased too. A lot of people are not putting in necessarily a garden as they are dedicating container space to being able to grow some tomatoes or peppers. We noticed that in the Smart Pot line has been really good for us, and has been a trend that continues to grow, as well as ceramic pots and clay pots for that matter, for people to put in their vegetables in those. In looking at our sales, I just kind of went through each kind of category for us to see what I thought was kind of moving a little bit. And as we said, we have 2 locations. The Memorial store is quite large for anybody who's not been there, and the Northwest Classic store is a much more normal looking store, much smaller and much easier to operate as far as that goes. But the trends have kind of been true in both stores. Obviously, we can get so much more plant material. There's so many more options in Memorial. So that's where most of this is probably what I was thinking about when I was doing it. But for what we have seen it happen in the smaller store as well. One of the largest categories that we have been a focus on, that we call the category, would be screening items. So once again, because of the pandemic, this has been going on for before the pandemic, but the pandemic's really brought it to the front too. If customers are going to spend that much more time in their yards, the one thing that they're going to notice is what they don't want to look at. And so they're constantly coming in, wanting to screen off the neighbor. They can see in the neighbor's house, or the neighbor can see in theirs, or they don't like the neighbor's shed, or that fence is ugly, or the gas meter or telephone box, or whatever it would be. Screening has always been a part of it, but because they're in the yard, I think they just notice that more. And there's more things where they sit that they aren't trying to. So it's probably one of the most common questions we get in the retail nursery is, well, what have you got to screen off, whatever it would be? So we've tried to make sure that we're stocked for that. And we've actually tried a little bit to merchandise that to where it's all relatively in a close proximity. Our marketing, we've tried to market a little bit as a screening options. So by that, it's a lot of there again of upright plants, such as upright junipers and hollies like Nellies and Leyland cypress and loblolly pines, but even crepe myrtles are being used for that, and altheas to some degree. Elaeagnus has been become quite popular because of that. And Photinia, amazingly enough, has probably not sold like it once did, but the sales have still been relatively good on that. And a large part of that is just for an inexpensive screen. Hydrangeas is another category that to me has kind of grown at an abnormal rate the last 3 or 4 years. And I don't exactly know why, other than I believe that it's because there's so many more varieties to pick from. And one of them that I was thinking about today was the white blooming varieties. So the dwarfer varieties of oak leaf hydrangea, as well as things like Limelight and Bobo and Little Lime. Those have sold pretty well the last 5 years when you could get them. Well, the commercial growers are finally getting their numbers up to where you're actually being able to keep those in inventory. And so naturally your sales are up. And I think there's more of those in the landscape, so there's more people seeing those. But we've noticed that we keep dedicating more space in the nursery and the hydrangeas because the space that we had originally just will be, once we fill it, we're out in a couple of days. So we've had to really expand that. This is going to sound, I debated on whether to even mention these because it seems kind of odd to me that I would mention these plants, but I Barberries and Spireas have both kind of grown a little bit in sales. I think that's a little bit twofold. I think that part of that is just because of the improvements in some of those plants. So the more upright growing barberries like the Rocket series, I think have certainly helped. Admiration, some of the dwarf gold varieties, I think have brought a lot of color and a little bit different look, even though we still do very well with crimson pygmy, surprisingly enough. And I think the color out of those has really helped. And Spireas the same. And for a long time, Gold Mound was what you sold. And there are so many more yellow blooming varieties that have better blooming, and the color stays a little better, doesn't quite fade as much, and even has some more red, tints of red in it. So those things seem to have been increased. I think part of it is they might be being used also as a substitute for knockout. So we constantly have people that come in, had knockouts, don't have knockouts, want something but don't want that. So that's often something that we steer them to. And I think that's probably helped with some. Another item would be Crape Myrtle. Crape Myrtle, I was worried, I think everybody was, when we started getting so much scale that maybe that would really hurt those sales. And I think maybe it did for a short period of time, that first year. But I think everybody's kind of figured out how to control that. And they seem to not be near the obstacle that it was when we first started seeing that pest. But I will say that the main gains, I think, in the Crape Myrtles are in the dwarf varieties. We are often constantly being asked for something that gets in the 2 to 3 to 5 foot range. So I think that has really been a growth in there. Again, that could also be partly due to replacing a knockout rose. I think Buddleias to a degree have kind of increased. And I think part of that is just because there's so many new compact varieties that don't get near as big and near as woody and bloom really well, stay much more compacted. I think that has helped a lot with the sales of those. I was going to mention roses, although our knockout sales kind of continue to go down. Drift roses have seemed to have picked up a little bit, and have seemed to be making a little bit more of a presence. I think there's probably more of those in the landscape now, so people see them a little bit more often. And so I think, and the size that they get, I think has made them desirable. But I wanted to make a comment on say hybrid teas and floribundas, grandifloras, and climbers. With the rose rosette problem, those things have, those things were falling for the last 15 years, actually, unless people put in rose gardens, and it's just not quite the thing that it was, certainly when I was young. But they seem to have stabilized. They don't seem to be falling in the last 3 or 4 years. In fact, they've actually had a little bit of a spurt, a little increase for us the last couple of years. It's probably sales related to the pandemic, but But at the same time, those numbers are not continuing to fall. In fact, they're actually coming back a little bit. So, which is good. As I tell customers all the time, I come up with a lot of different plants, but I can't come up with a substitute for a rose very well. There's a handful of other items. Sunshine privet obviously has been a trend for a while, and hopefully they'll get those numbers as the numbers come up. They'll do, but that's certainly a plant that has become a good seller for everyone, I think. Ornamental grasses have kind of held their own. I don't know that they're necessarily increasing a lot. Dwarf pampas grasses, ivory feathers is still probably the most asked for. But I will say that the larger grasses, other than that grass, maiden grasses, standard maiden and variegated maiden grass, some of those taller grasses, the sales on those have actually seemed to go down, and our increases in grasses are more in the dwarf varieties. So smaller growing ones like Mexican feather, we can never seem to find, when we never seem to keep enough of. Elijah blue fescue, blonde ambition, Hamlin. Some of those dwarfer grasses seem to be, and there's so many more of them now that those seem to be, seem to have a little bit of a demand in that. Japanese maples, of course, have always been a good item for us. And with more new people, with the millennials in there, more of them are seeing them, and then of course more people redoing their yards. Those sales were really good the last 2 or 3 years. Once again, I think that although we carry B&B, I think the container sales on those have been really good. They're easier for us to make a display with, put them where they're easier to see, to take care of, and once again, I think the customers are a little bit more comfortable with planting that container than they are B&B. But that is certainly, and at one time we certainly carry a few of the more unusual varieties, but to be real honest, the growth in that is just the standard varieties of Crimson Queen and Blood Good, and the ones that have been around for quite some time, Red Dragon and Fire Glow and Coral Bark, and those are still where your bulk of your sales are. One of the things that we've done, I guess, or focused on in the last few years in perennials is trying to keep enough in bloom. So we've often, like I said, we grow a good 50, 60, at one time, probably 75% of our perennials. We actually scaled that down a little bit on purpose, not necessarily because we didn't have the sales per se, but we wanted to try to get more plants in bloom. So with more people working in their yards, more people being invested in their yards, and them still not necessarily being comfortable with even what the difference is between an annual and a perennial, the perennials have really sold when they're in bloom. So we've tried to make a concentrated effort to make sure that our perennial section is stocked with blooming plants that are in bloom. And so if that means that what we have in production is not in bloom yet, it might be ready, sellable and all that, it's just not blooming yet. We actually will leave that in production if we can buy those in an open market that are listed in bloom and bring those in, because we know we can turn a larger number of those at the same time, give time for those other ones to come into bloom. So it has been kind of a focus of ours, I guess, for the last 5 or 6 years. It's not always easy to do, but trying to make sure that we keep more bloom in the perennial section. We've always done that in annuals, but we've tried to really focus on the perennials doing that. We also, I mentioned larger sizes, and I didn't mention perennials, but we also have started growing a fair amount. We grow about 4,000 3-gallon perennials. And there again, I'm not too sure we couldn't do a lot more than that. It's really more of a space issue, but boy, when they come into bloom, I'll sit here and look at them and go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with those? Then all of a sudden they come in full bloom, and in 2 weeks they're all gone. So we obviously don't do all of our line of perennials, but we found the ones that really look good in the pot. So we're doing some salvias, obviously, and catmint has been a really good one. We do a few gaillardias and a few rebeckias, and the daylilies, obviously. And so there's Gara. So there's quite a few in there that we've come up with that have really been good sales for us. And that seems to become a trend. I don't know if it is anywhere else, but it certainly has been for us since we've allocated the space for those. Milkweed, of course, is a trend that I don't know that we can ever keep up with. No matter what we try to do production, we could never seem to keep enough milkweed at some good portion of the time. I'm still having people asking for milkweed. Xeriscapes and natives, once again, I think are trending, but I'm not sure everybody acts like they're trending, but we haven't necessarily noticed a huge increase in sales or conversation about it for the most part. Not that we don't get people asking for both, but I can't say that has gotten, it's certainly more than it was 20 years ago, but I can't say that has grown very exponentially. I will say that our yuccas sales have increased pretty good. They seem to be doing much better. I think there's lots of commercial applications that are using yuccas and sages, and so they're seeing more of those and how easy they are. So those sales are definitely up, but I'm not too sure that we're certainly not being overrun with people that are asking for xeriscape and native. Doesn't mean we're not trying to get them to, but it certainly has not quite got to where I would maybe necessarily consider it a trend. There again, in the greenhouse, I reviewed some of our production plan to see what we had in that. Again, I mentioned that we're growing a lot of bigger sizes. So in a 12-inch pot, as I said, we do quite a bit of combination plants. So those combination plantings are usually some kind of mix of verbena, calibrachoa, petunia, some kind of like that combination. We do quite a few of those. We also do some hot weather ones that are a combination of lantana or a penta, angelonia, scavola, different kinds of combinations. Most of the plant breeders and suppliers for that kind of stuff concentrate more on the cooler season stuff, and they don't always have a lot of stuff for a warm season such as here is in Texas, so they don't come up with near as many combinations of lantana, angelonia, penta, but we've mixed a few and kind of come up with a couple that we think kind of work a little bit. But that is something that has really done well. In fact, we actually do those in a hanging basket as well. We grow them as small as in an 8-inch pot, a 12-inch pot, a 12-inch hanging basket, and we do a fair amount of 16-inch hanging baskets of those. And so once again, not something that you could probably get shipped in, but it sure is fun to put it out in the greenhouse, bring it up. A few items that we've really caught on for us the last few years have been lobularia has really taken off and is just a huge crop for us anymore. And we probably could make it even a bigger crop if we grow it in a smaller size. But when we first started doing it about 7 or 8 years ago, we grew them in an 8-inch pot, which seems kind of silly, but we did, and we just kept selling them. And we finally switched it to a 6-inch pot, and the same problem. So I'm having reservations about trying to put them in something smaller when I can't hardly keep enough of the 6-inch in stock, even though we keep adding to production. But it has certainly taken the heat well, and it's bloomed well, and we plant a few in the beds out front. It has really become a popular plant for us. Bubblegum Petunia, the Vista series of Petunia has also become very good. Obviously, bubblegum with that bright pink has really been a good seller. And once again, we don't do any in the small size. The smallest we grow in is a gallon. And then we do, some hanging baskets. And once again, we do some of the big 16-inch baskets, which are gorgeous when they come into bloom in the 16-inch size. And once again, every year, I think they're not going to sell. And then they get in full bloom in one weekend, and just about 2 weekends, and they're all gone. Vinca is another thing that to me is really kind of surprisingly has really grown for us lately. As I said before, our 4-inch sales, we don't grow any 4-inch, we buy all that in. And our 4-inch sales on Vinca has always been good. But our growth in Vinca is not in the 4-inch, it's in 6-inch and 8-inch. And so we've made a concentrated effort to try to have more of that in 6-inch or 8-inch, or if I buy it in, maybe a gallon, in order to have that plant in bloom in a decent size. Has really exploded for us in the last couple of years. And obviously it's core in some of the newer varieties, but I think it's just the size, and you get that in bloom. There again, to put that in a big clay pot, they don't want a little plant. Begonias, there again, not a cocktail series, not necessarily a bronze leaf, but dragon wing is the one that has really done really well for us. There again, our best sales for that are in a 10-inch hanging basket or a 12-inch patio pot is where we sell most of that. We'll occasionally have some in a 6-inch or an 8-inch, but primarily it's the bigger sizes that have really done the best for us. That plant really starts shining when it gets to that size. Some of the newer begonias, like that begonia big series or megawatt, those things with the bigger leaves, those things have been very popular, especially in a 12-inch patio pot. And we also do some of those in a 6-inch. And so our begonia sales increases have been in those and not necessarily in something like an old cocktail series, just an old bronze leaf begonia. Sun coleus has been something that's been really big for us for quite some time. And part of that is we do them all we do most of them in a 6-inch. And then we do those again in a 12-inch patio pot. And it's kind of funny, which is a great crop as fast as that makes, or it really helps us look good when you look at the bottom line, when you see how fast you get the coleus to get up to size. Some of the lantanas, some of the newer varieties of lantana have kind of taken off. The Bloomify series has been really good for us. We've been able to do it in a 4.5-inch and a 6-inch, in an 8-inch, in a 12-inch, in hanging baskets. It has really done well for us, and has seemed to stay compact and bloomed well. And the color that's in that has really been a good one. We've tried a number of the other newer varieties, some of the Charm series and stuff like that, and all of those have done well, but that Bloomify has really kind of stood out. However, I will say that we still grow probably more new gold lantana than we do anything else. Sotrosa Geranium is another item that has been popular for quite a while. And so there again, we don't offer a very small plant. They're all in, I can't remember now. I think they're an 8-inch pot. They're certainly not any smaller than a 6-inch. And so, but Sotrosa is one of those that has done well. And then, of course, lastly, in the greenhouse, Patio Tropicals, as I mentioned before, hibiscus and bougainvillea, mandavillas and ixoras, all of that kind of stuff continues to gain. We don't grow any of that, so it's more of a problem of trying to find it in bloom and looking good when we do than it really does. Succulents is another one that category has not slowed down yet. At one time it was fairy gardens a few years ago, and then that kind of wore out its welcome to a large extent in this part of the market, and succulents become kind of the replacement for that. and they have stayed strong. I keep wondering if they'll go by the way of the fairy gardens, but they haven't yet. They've stayed strong, and I think they probably will just because of the ease of care of them. I went through and looked at a few of the non-plant items that we do. These are items that would be what we would consider a hard good. And I think our lawn care and our plant care items are up. So whether it be lawn or plant fertilizers and insecticides and fungicides, as well as herbicides, of course, on the lawn care side, all of those have been up and certainly have increased in the last 3 or 4 years, and certainly the last 2. I think the last 2 years is mostly because there again, I think people spent more time in their yards, so consequently they noticed more problems in their yard. They saw the weeds that they weren't paying attention before, and noticed that a plant was maybe struggling, or it had bad color, or had an insect infestation. So those are all up a little bit. I don't expect those to go completely crazy, only because they seem to be they're certainly not going down in sales in the maintenance and lawn care companies. So I think that, but they've certainly held their own, and have actually had a good increase, and it's actually a really good category for us. One thing that we've noticed in those types of sales is years ago, primarily those things were sold in a concentrate form, where you either mixed them into a ozone sprayer or you mixed a tank sprayer. And we still carry quite a few things in a concentrate form, but our increases are not in concentrates. Our increases are in ready-to-use items. So whether it be a trigger sprayer or whether it already have a hose-on application to it, those are the items that are actually increasing in sales. And so we've actually made sure, we actually make sure that we have that, even if we're only going to carry, say, one thing in that line, that particular product, we're going to at least have one that's something easy to use, that's ready to use. And we may not even carry it in the concentrate just because of lack of demand. Years ago, you would carry a concentrate of maybe an 8 ounce in a pint, a quart, and a gallon. Now we're lucky to have maybe one size of it, simply because the customers are more or less demanding that it be a product that's ready for them to use. Garden seed and seed supplies items like peat pots and greenhouse trays and all that kind of stuff. Those things have obviously all increased over the last couple of years, just because gardening increased the last couple of years. So with more people planting gardens, there's certainly more seeds being produced, but there's also more seed growing supplies to take care of that. Seed growing supplies probably are also on the increase in part because of the marijuana community, and the people that are trying to grow that have had some kind of a need. Although I believe that as that market goes on, that won't necessarily be a huge garden center item, at least not in the metro area, simply because there's so many more avenues that are catering specifically for that and trade. And so I think we'll always sell a little of it for that, but I don't think it's going to. At one time, we thought it would really explode, but I don't think that's going to be the case. But it is up. And then just a couple of things that are, to me, probably completely pandemic related, but birdseed is up. And our birdseed sales have really been good. Now I'll tell you that we kind of redid how we were doing them and moved them to a new location and put more on the shelf and made a bigger display of them. So I'm sure that helped our sales. We also kept running out, and so we made sure we were going to warehouse some, even though I don't, warehousing bird seeds always a little bit of a problem with the rodents, but we've managed to solve that problem, and so we've had more of it, so our sales are up. But I truly believe that the real reason is that people are spending more time at home, so they're feeding more birds. if you're at the lake all week, you're probably not putting the bird feed out at the house. But when you're at home, you're not traveling, you're probably going to feed the birds. So I think that's one reason why that category is up pretty good for us. Tools is another one that I think is pandemic related. Our tool sales of something is, whether it be a hand tool like a trowel or a pair of pruners, or whether it be a pair of loppers and a shovel, rake. All of those sales for the most part have been up the last couple of years, even though it's been a climate that's been hard to keep product on the shelves, but they certainly have been up. And I believe that's, once again, I think that's pandemic related, in that you have people that have never really planted much plants or done much work in their yard, and now that they're home, they're finding they need to replace their shovel or actually get a shovel. So I think that's up. Whether that trend will continue, hope it does. We're certainly kind of planning on it. We're hoping it does, but I think that's probably more a result of that. Organics is another one of those that, to me, it's a little bit like the xeriscapes and the natives. We've been talking about that being a trend for years now. My gosh, since the 70s and 80s. And although I think it gets a little bit more response all the time, you certainly have people with stronger views about whether they should use a non-organic product. But I'm not too sure that it's really, our sales in that have not particularly grown abnormally. So I'm not too sure. We certainly offer or try to offer a organic solution in everything that we do, but I'm not too, for example, we still sell quite a bit of commercial pre-emergent weed killer, but we carry corn gluten too, where corn gluten sales are not out of control, I can tell you that. So I think that category will continue to grow, and I think it will one day be the norm, but I don't think it's quite, it's certainly not setting any record. So again, on a, not talking about, this is not really horticultural related, but I think it's a trend that's not just a trend, it's just a way of life now, is in marketing our garden center, our nursery, in fact, anything that we do, our landscape division, whatever it is, it's now a social media world. And so we spend a fair amount of resources, time and money, working on a social media campaign. And I think not only is that, like I said, that's only a trend, that's just a way of life. Back when I was a young guy, and we spent my time cutting out clip art out of books and putting little line drawing clip art on and gluing it on a sheet of paper to write out an ad to give to the newspaper to run. We would mail out newsletters to customer base. So I spent time putting names into a database and writing a newsletter, and then taking it to a printer, and then putting the labels on it, then taking it to the post office. Now we do all that online, all that's digital. And so it's good because it's so much faster to do, and it looks so much better than what it did. And it's so much easier to reproduce. So if you do it once, you can send it out multiple times, which was a little bit hard to do the old way. But that is just part of what it is. We have a website, obviously, and we have a garden club on the website where you sign up, and we send emails and stuff like that. The emails we send out about twice a week, and in it we'll list sales or just items that we have that we think are hot that week. So when the lobularia is really in bloom, we're going to talk about lobularia. Suncoleus. If all of a sudden we get a big load in of upright boxwoods, we're going to talk about boxwoods for containers. It also has, and we try to have some information in it. So one of the concentrations we've tried to do the last couple of years is to have more of an information deal. Well, it's hard to have that on there since most people are looking at it on their phone. It's another typical, you see them all the time, the click this button for more information takes you to our website, and then you can read about all the different screening plants and spacings on them or whatever information we put out, whether it's on screening plants or tomatoes or whatever it is. And so we've tried to give some information on that, kind of like the old newsletter was, with some information as well as trying to actually have an actual sale. And then, of course, you've got all the platforms of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and all of that, and not just the posting of pictures and the content, but we do a lot of videos directed at that audience. And so we do multiple videos. We'll do 2 or 3 videos a week in the spring, and those are posted on our Facebook site. And so, and it's just a constant deal that, you know, in the newspaper deal, you just kind of did one and it gave out 2 ads for the week, but now it's every day, almost every hour. So that is certainly like I said, it's not just a trend, it's just the way of life. At one time, Mike had asked me to talk about, challenges. Another time he asked me to ask about trends, and then it stayed trends. And so I'm not too sure that the trends are a challenge, but there are a few challenges that I haven't mentioned. Some of these are just a way of life too. And some of these are hopefully, well, if we get closer to the end of a pandemic, maybe these will resolve. But obviously, the number one issue we probably have is the same issue almost everybody has, is labor. So not just trying to find educated or experienced labor is really hard, and trying to find just labor is really difficult. So that right now would probably be the challenge. So we're having, as is most everybody in this business, having record years in sales, and yet we're having a harder time trying to find anybody to help us do the work. So consequently, we've had to try to figure out, it's forced us to try to be more efficient in what we do. So we spend a lot of time trying to improve our systems, and how we handle things, and how we handle products, and how we do that. We've made some progress. We still got a long ways to go on that, because that's not always a very easy or clear-cut solution. And not to mention the fact I have tried a few things that didn't work very well. Another issue, challenge, is the rising cost. So because of the demand and the labor issue for everyone involved in the manufacturing side and the growing side, the costs have gone up pretty good over the last 2-3 years, especially, and certainly the last 12-15 months. And I don't know that I see much of an end in that either. And then on top of that, the freight to get it to you has really spiraled. And so between the cost and the freight cost, it's a constant deal of paying attention to what your retails are for that product, to be able to make sure that you maintain and protect the margins that you have. Is the concern that at some point we'll have that price to the point that the customers will decide they don't want to do that anymore? Well, it's certainly a concern for ours. It hasn't seemed to happen yet, but we know there's a ceiling somewhere. But hopefully we won't find that for a while. Availability, because of all of this, availability has often been a problem. So even though you're willing to get it, you're willing to pay the price, and you're willing to pay the freight, they don't have it. So whether that's true, whether you're looking for a shovel or a weed killer, or whether you're looking for an oak tree, a verbena, or a hosta, or a boxwood for that matter. It's just, we end up carrying varieties that we don't normally carry, because you can't get the varieties that you do. The nice thing is that as long as you can educate the customer and still make the recommendation that you would recommend, then I think the variety, I think they're still finding a plant that suits their need. But it certainly has made it interesting. So we found that we've had to buy more than what we would normally buy. So we're trying to confer space to have more warehouse space, to have more stocking space, to be able to have more stuff on the shelf, so that we can try to keep that product in to satisfy those needs for those customers. And back to a social media challenge, besides social media in itself, which, by the way, Mike, would be a really good subject in the future. But don't call me, by the way. I'm probably not the guy who should run your social media talk. But one of the large issues we have is answering questions and recommendations that come from social media. So once again, I mentioned this to people around here years ago when I was young. The seed catalogs would go out to customers. Get all these seed catalogs, and they'd come by your store and want a, what they used to call it, a chain tree or something that, of course, wasn't hard to hear. But they saw it in the seed catalog, and bring all this stuff in that you didn't have or could stock or could get, or would live in Oklahoma. And now they find that online, and they find it in the click of a button. They can find it when they're standing in front of you. But as I said, the millennials are YouTubers, so they go look, they do a little research before they come in. So they're often coming in asking for product that they saw online or was recommended online or something like that. So it was it's a constant deal of customers phoning in and texting in through our website and emailing in asking questions on this plant or that plant and the availability of that plant. So do you have XYZ? Do you have this? Do you do that? Well, I think anybody in the business can say when it's April and you've got more people in the store than you can handle, it's really hard to answer those questions. Do you have such and such? And you don't know whether you got any left or not. And so now you've got to go back out there and find them and come back and tell them whether you do or not, or look up when you think you're going to get them. So that's a huge challenge that we still haven't. We have recommendations that they get, that call in, that somebody posts that this is the plant they should carry, and then they come in and want it. And I go, well, you read that post, but that post was in Florida. So that plant may not particularly do well in Oklahoma in the wintertime. So those are some challenges in the social media side that's quite concerning, in that it's really hard to come up with an answer for how we're going to handle it. And one other thing was online shopping. The pandemic forced a lot of us, in the retail side especially, in all types of industries, mostly including restaurants, of course, was how we're going to do online shopping. How are you going to do pickup by customers? And we, along with several others, tried that. Almost all of us that have a retail location tried that in the middle of 2020 to try to see how that would work. And what we found out was that it's pretty doable in July. It's not too doable in April. The demands of how many people are trying to use that, and the availability of plant material and how different it is, and how many different colored blooms there are, and colors there are, and sizes there are, and the fact that availability changes constantly, and the fact that you might have had that plant this week and the next, and now you're out, and you may be 3 weeks before you're going to get another crop, whether you're growing or whether you're trying to find it, has made the online shopping thing very difficult to try to keep up with and try to manage that. I'm sure that the answer to that is, sadly, is to limit what you put available for online shopping. And yet then that customer calls up, and it was amazing when we were doing it, how many people were online shopping, but they'd already, well, I saw them in your store yesterday. Well, why didn't you buy them while you were here? Because they wanted to online shop. And so that whole thing and that curbside pickup, that's a challenge for a company, for stores in the horticulture business. For me, when we are so seasonal and so much of our sales are compressed into a short period of time. So that'll be a real challenge in the future to try to work on, to try to figure out. I'm sure it's going to come to that. And so ignoring it's not going to do any good. But I'm sure that's going to be something that's going to take a while to figure out how we're going to handle it. Well, Mike, I've been through my list. I hope I provided something for somebody.
You did. And I'm looking here. Thank you, Bob. I'm looking in the chat box. I know Donna Dollins wrote, she's interested in social media, and she's our social media guru here. Thank God we have somebody that's more competent than me. And by the way, Bob, we did have Ruth Inman, who's my next door neighbor here in Ag Hall, speak at Thackerville on social media, but I think we're probably overdue to get her back at the next trade show or event, because this stuff is rapidly changing. And like you said, it's not going away. It's only going to get more and more prevalent and
Not going away.
I appreciate your comment on that, but we do need to do more of that. Bob, and don't be modest with me here. So you guys have enjoyed decades now of success in TLC before, during your tenure. What kind of distances are you finding your patrons willing to come to see you and Frank and Wendy and the gang? I mean, I'm serious. What surprises you sometimes when you
well, I'm sure you'll remember this. There was many years in the it's been 10 years since we've done it, but there were many years when Charles and Linda Shackelford produced a TV show, and it was on, oh my goodness, I can't remember which network it was on now, but it was one of the local TV stations. It was actually, if I remember right, it was actually done during the off season of the OU football show, if I remember right. And so they could do it in the spring and early summer. And then once it got to the football time again, it went back to the football show. They eventually did away with that show, took it to cable. And so that time period didn't exist anymore. So we couldn't figure out a way to continue that. But because of that, then yeah, they ended up appealing to people all over the state. So to this day, we still enjoy people coming from we get lots of people from your neck of the woods. We get lots of people from Stillwater, Woodward, Clinton, Altus. We even get a few from Tulsa, but primarily anywhere in the western half of the state, we certainly get them. Shawnee gets quite a few. I have people from Ada. We have we have our Moonlight Madness sale in the end of June, and I've got there's at least 3 different people that drive from Texas to come up here.
Oh wow! Congrats.
So we like to think that we're just a little local shop, but we are blessed in that our trade area seems to be a little bit wider than that. So, it's been really good.
Neat. Thank you. I have another random question. It's literally random, but one of your sub themes that I've been hearing is this whole instant gratification with society, not only in plant material size, but ready to apply materials.
Yeah.
And so not being a businessman myself, I was like, duh, I see if these are that profitable and the demand is there. I'm guessing if you had more hours in the day, more people, you would only expand further if and when you get the opportunity. Am I right on that? Or?
Oh no, I agree. They seem to have less patience. So not that price is still not an effect, but I think it has. They were willing to, they certainly are willing to buy a bigger plant and not have to wait, as long as there's value for that dollar. So if you're looking, for example, let's say an Indian hawthorn, and you're looking at the difference in a 3-gallon and a 7-gallon, the cost is probably twice that we're going to sell a 7-gallon for a 3-gallon, maybe even a little more than twice. If that size is, say, 3 times bigger, then they'll snatch those up in a heartbeat.
I see.
I think it's partly it's just, does that additional size really warrant that? And so as long as you're keeping your sizes good, you get undersized plants, it's hard to sell them for that. But boy, if there's value for the dollar, yeah, they're not opposed to spending some money on that. Just like you said, they want it instant. They don't want to wait.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we found in the greenhouse in production too, which is why we've done so much more with 6-inch, and now we're expanding the 8-inch line. And we've been doing the 10 and 12-inch line for quite a while. We keep adding to that. And hanging baskets, we've for years and years, we basically just grew 10-inch hanging baskets. We've been playing around the last couple of years with some 12-inch and those combo pots and those 16-inch. Well, this year we're making the plunge. We're adding several thousand a basket, but I'm not putting them in a 10-inch. We're gonna put them in a 12-inch.
Okay.
We need a bigger plant. And they don't seem to be hesitant in spending the money as long as it has some more finished look.
Okay.
Now, would they do that with something rather plain and not in bloom? No, but hopefully I won't put something plain and not in bloom on sales floor.
Right.
So I think as long as the color is good, and like I said, that plant has some size to it. Yeah, so far they seem to really be liking that.
That's neat. Bob, what do you think? I know you and Frank have talked about that, I'm sure. Closed doors on what really distinguishes TLC from a lot of other folks. And you don't have to be shy. I mean, is it your service? Is it your inventory? What is it that you probably are the most proud of at the end of the day, or at the end of your career, maybe even?
Well, Mike, the thing about saying that you're successful means you had to do a lot of things right over a long period of time.
Sure.
There's no shortcuts to anything, and you can seldom be very successful in just doing one thing. So obviously it started with the Shackelfords, the standard that they set, and the way that they presented this business, and how this business organically grew over the time that they were here, and the focus that they put on having a little bit of every kind of plant, and the diversity of plant material they had, and the amount of products that they carried, and as well as the amount of staff that they had and service that they tried to provide it. And of course, we just tried to do the same thing and interject even some new ideas into that, and maybe some more energy into it. Sometimes not that the business was, we certainly didn't rescue it. It was doing great. But sometimes just a new look at it puts a different kind of energy on it, and sometimes that'll give you a little momentum. I could tell you that for the most part, I think that in the time that I have been here, the main thing that we've tried to focus on is making sure that we always have product. We may not even have as diverse a product that we have had before. We have certainly taken some things out of stock, but those things were usually things that were not very good sellers. We may have sold a few, but they certainly didn't sell very well. And what we found out again is you only have X amount of space. So if you're running out of something that everybody wants because you got 10 things that hardly anybody wants, is not necessarily servicing your customer.
Okay.
It's a delicate balance trying to find the in-between. And that's what we try to spend a lot of time doing, is trying to find that. How do you have a wide selection without having so much selection that it hurts the availability of what you have to sell?
I see. Okay.
In addition, we've tried really hard, and not that this wasn't true before, but as I said, we've actually cut our perennial growing from where it was 10 or 15 years ago. We grow probably a third less perennials than we did, and yet our perennial sales are up. Well, we made that concentrated effort in that we needed to try to get more bloom on a plant, which means we needed to take care of it a little bit different, and not maybe give it a little more space when it was growing that we were having struggle doing. And at the same time, it also allowed me that you're always going to have gaps in between crops where this crop is good and that one's not ready yet. So rather than fill the bench with that crop that's ready but not blooming, if we can find that crop on an open market that's in bloom, we just bring that in and fill that bench, which increases our sales greatly, and it reaches the amount of excitement for a customer in that now they see much more things in bloom. And as we all know, it's so much better to buy a plant when you can see it than it is to see a picture.
Absolutely.
Being able to touch and look and smell is so valuable in our industry. So even though you can put a picture up that says this is the color of that petunia, it's not near as effective as having that petunia in full bloom. Okay. So I think that is actually something my dad taught me 15 years ago, but that's something we've actually tried to focus on quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, service is always big, and we try to have enough people. You've been here a few times in the spring. You know that having enough people sounds good, but at some point you're just outnumbered pretty good. So yeah. A lot of it is trying to figure out how can you improve your signage and the way you display your store and how you keep it organized so that it's easier for people to self-shop.
Okay.
I think we've made some gains in that in the last few years.
Okay. I get that you've only got X number of square feet and that you're also hurting for real live human beings, as in a labor shortage. But in a perfect world, Bob, would you, if you had an opportunity, I assume there's even greater demand than you can fulfill in terms of landscape installations, getting back to instant gratification where you go out and reassure them you do it yourself or they know it's been professionally installed. Is there potential for more growth if you had more hours in the day, more human beings?
Gosh, yes.
Of course, yeah.
Not just on the landscape side, which obviously always has potential, but there are tons of, we don't really have a service that goes out and does the custom pots. If you bring your pot in, we can go pick up your pots and bring them in, but we don't promote that near enough because mostly it's a labor problem.
I see.
We just, and that's a labor, that's a skilled labor. You just can't send anybody out to do somebody's pot and make it look good. So yeah, there's opportunity in that yeah, if it was a perfect world, we'd have some of that. But even the retail side, I've said this for a large part of my career. I learned this a long time ago. I asked Jack Sanders, for those that remember Jack Sanders back when they had the old Sanders Nursery in Inola. When I was in Shawnee with my parents' nursery, my dad would send me up there to pick up loads from Oregon, mostley pine trees and jet maples and stuff like that. And I go up to Jack's place and I see, my gosh, he has plants as far as a man can see. I mean, he didn't have 50 jet maples. He must have had 500 different jet maples. And he had all these people that were not just landscapers, but all these homeowners that were out there on a weekend driving from Tulsa all the way out to Inola. And I remember I asked Jack, I said, good grief, Jack, how do you get all these people to come out here? He says, well, it's pretty simple, Bob. He says, we got a lot, so we sell a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes it's just as simple as that. Just make sure you're not running out of product, and there'll be more people coming in. There's nothing worse than going in someplace and you think you're going to go buy something, you get there and they don't have it. And that doesn't matter what you're buying. They can be out of cheeseburgers. And if you wanted a cheeseburger, you're going, I really want that, whatever they're offering in exchange. So
right, that makes sense.
Have a lot is one thing. And at the same time, of course, we spend a lot of time trying to make sure we have quality plants and trying to have something good. But I've never seen anybody in the business that said they wanted non-quality plants. So pretty sure that's not unusual. I will say that I think that having a lot is always what's going to draw people. And if you can have a lot that looks good, you can't go very far wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find something. I kind of dare you in the spring to walk through that greenhouse. You got to really hate plants to walk through our nursery or our greenhouse in the spring and not buy some.
Yes. Yeah,
If you care about a plant at all, you're probably going to pick something up. There's so much out.
absolutely. Yeah, it's almost an emotional journey in the spring just to see all the color, and you get excited about all the possibilities of what you can do in your home landscape. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a negative to that because you can do the same thing in a much smaller store.
Okay.
You could certainly have a smaller store that's not going to have quite the traffic that we have, and you could certainly have a nice looking store that has a little bit of everything and have it all in bloom. But if I was starting from scratch and you could redo it, I'm not too sure you would ever dream up TLC. It's not laid out. It's laid out kind of odd. It's really long and narrow, and it's a lot of steps going anywhere, and but we've made it work, and the Shackelfords made it work, and we're still making it work. But it's kind of a beast. Having a store half this size would sure be easier to operate, I can tell you.
Okay.
But I
Donna,
think the advantage that we have, one of the main reasons for success, I think, for TLC is the old adage of location, location, location.
Mm-hmm.
Because TLC is located on Memorial Road, which is basically the dividing line between North Oklahoma City and Edmond. That means we get all the Edmond traffic and we get all the North Oklahoma City traffic. If this store was 2 miles to the north or 2 miles to the south, you couldn't say that.
Okay.
If you were 2 miles north of here, the Oklahoma City people would be less likely to drive. Right now, they still think they're in Oklahoma City, which technically I guess they are. But they would go, I don't have to drive all the way to Norman. I don't have to drive all the way to Edmond. And the Edmond people would say, yeah, I'm not driving all the way to Oklahoma City. But we're kind of on the borderline. So we're kind of adopted by both groups. So I think location from that standpoint has put us right in the middle of two of the largest markets in the state.
It's fantastic. Nice problem to have. Don, am I missing questions that I'm not seeing on the chat feature? I don't see any. People are being shy today, Bob. Don't take it personally.
I'm not seeing any.
And the good news is, Bob, even though it's obviously a busy day and I didn't get 100 or 200 people to tune in, we will have a YouTube where people will be watching you at 3 a.m. for, perpetuity. So don't take this personally, but
Wow.
That's just, that gets back to trends. People like to, watch this.
They like to watch it when they want to watch it, don't they?
On demand. So we're making that available to them down the road. But we appreciate your time today and congratulations on your ongoing success. And really happy to see what you do here this upcoming growing season. And
well, the nice thing is it'll be a challenge. It'll be fun.
Yeah, sure it will be.
More exciting in the nursery business in spring.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
If you don't like spring, you shouldn't be in the business, should you?
I wouldn't think so, sir.
No, you should not.
Yeah, I would not think so. But I don't have any other questions, Bob. I don't see any questions in the chat. So we might go ahead and wrap this up. But again, people will be watching this throughout this year and certainly next year. And we're grateful for your time and look forward to keeping in touch with you and appreciate you imparting some of your wisdom and philosophy today to us. I mean that sincerely. So on that note, everybody tuning in, thank you for your time and stay tuned for 2022. We've got a lot of additional great speakers from Oklahoma and outside of Oklahoma coming up, and also some in-person workshops. To echo what Bob was saying, life's got to go on with COVID. We've got to start getting back to normal at some point in time. So we're going to do a hybrid approach, Bob, next year. I'm really looking forward to that. So really craving human beings, not just screen time. So
this is my first to do this. I'm kind of stand in front of the crowd and walk around a lot. It's a lot easier. Sitting here is really difficult for me.
No, it's Zoom.
I certainly enjoyed it. I appreciate the time.
Thank you for your time. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll talk soon. All right. Take
Thank
care.
you,
Happy
Bob.
holidays.
Thank you,
Bye.
Bob.
You bet. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you and everybody else.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.